Welcome to the Scottish Highlands in the year 1594, during the reign of King James VI of Scotland, when the clan system dominates Highland society, when blood feuds between rival clans can span generations and erupt into violent warfare over matters of honour, cattle raids, or disputed territories, and when a young warrior named Alastair MacGregor prepares for another day of training with the weapons that define Highland warfare, the claymore, the targe, and the dirk, learning the fighting techniques that may soon save his life when his clan faces their MacDonald rivals in battle. For the next few hours, we will explore how Scottish Highlanders actually used claymores in clan warfare, examining the distinctive two-handed Highland broadsword and its fighting techniques, the role of the small round shield called the targe in Highland combat, the brutal reality of interclan conflicts where entire communities could be destroyed, and the unique warrior culture that emerged in Scotland's remote glens, where royal authority was weak and clan loyalty was absolute. If you enjoy these detailed explorations of warrior cultures and the practical realities of historical combat, please like and subscribe to support our channel. Our story begins in a small Highland settlement in Glen Stray, in the territory controlled by Clan Gregor, where approximately 200 people, men, women, and children of the MacGregor clan, live in scattered stone cottages surrounded by rough pasture land where cattle and sheep graze. The settlement exists in a state of constant low-level tension with neighbouring clans, particularly the MacDonalds of Glencoe, with whom the MacGregors have feuded for decades over cattle theft, territorial boundaries, and ancient grievances that no one can quite remember the origin of, but that everyone feels obligated to avenge. Alastair MacGregor is 19 years old, the youngest son of a minor tacksman, a clan member who holds land from the chief and who owes military service in return, and he has been training in Highland warfare since he was 12. He is not yet a fully recognised warrior. That status will come only after he proves himself in actual combat, but he is nearing the end of his apprenticeship and expects to face battle soon, as intelligence from clan scouts suggests that the MacDonalds are planning a major cattle raid that will inevitably lead to armed conflict. The day begins before dawn, approximately 5 a.m. on a cold October morning, when Alastair is awakened by his father, Donald MacGregor, a scarred veteran of numerous clan battles who has survived 3 decades of Highland warfare through skill, luck, and ruthless pragmatism. "Up, boy," Donald says gruffly, prodding Alastair with his foot. "The MacDonalds won't wait for you to finish your beauty sleep when they come raiding, and prepare yourself." Alastair rises from his sleeping platform, a wooden frame with a straw mattress, covered with wool blankets and a plaid, the large woolen cloth that serves as both cloak and blanket in Highland culture. The interior of the cottage is dark and cold, the peat fire that heated the single room overnight having burned down to embers. He dresses quickly in the practical clothing of a Highland warrior, a long linen shirt called a claymore, reaching to mid-thigh, covered by a belted plaid that is wrapped around the waist and thrown over the shoulder. The plaid is made from wool woven in the distinctive pattern associated with his clan, not the highly regulated tartans of later Romantic Highland mythology, but a simpler pattern using local dyes that create colours of browns, greens, and some reds. Over these basic garments, Alastair will later add his war gear, a padded leather jerkin that provides some protection against cuts, his targe, the small round shield, his dirk, a long dagger, and most importantly, his claymore, the great two-handed sword that is the signature weapon of Highland warfare. But before handling weapons, Alastair must eat. The morning meal is simple but substantial: oatmeal porridge cooked in water with some milk and butter, accompanied by barley bread and some dried fish. The food is plain, but provides the calories necessary for the physical training that will occupy much of the day. As Alastair eats, his father provides the morning's first instruction, a lecture on clan history and on the current strategic situation. "The MacDonalds are gathering strength," Donald explains, his weathered face serious. "Our scouts report they've been assembling men in Glencoe, perhaps 200 warriors, maybe more. They claim we stole cattle from them last month. We did steal those cattle, of course, but they stole twice as many from us the month before, so the theft was just compensation. But the MacDonalds don't see it that way. They see an insult that must be avenged with blood, and their chief, Alastair Og MacDonald, is a proud man who cannot let a slight pass unanswered. So they will come, probably within the week, and we must be ready. This casual discussion of cattle raiding and clan vengeance illustrates the reality of Highland society in the late 16th century. The Scottish Highlands exist in a state of what modern scholars call endemic low-intensity conflict, constant small-scale warfare between clans over resources, honor, and territorial control, punctuated by occasional larger battles when blood feuds escalate beyond control. The Scottish Crown's authority in the Highlands is weak and distant. Royal laws exist, royal courts theoretically have jurisdiction, but the practical reality is that clan chiefs rule their territories with near absolute power, and disputes between clans are settled through negotiation, arbitration by powerful chiefs, or through violence. This system creates a culture where every man must be a potential warrior, where skill with weapons is essential for survival, where personal courage and clan loyalty are the highest values, and where blood feuds can destroy entire families or even entire clans. After the morning meal, Alastair follows his father outside into the cold pre-dawn darkness. The settlement is beginning to wake. Smoke rising from cottage chimneys, cattle lowing in their pens, men emerging to begin the day's work. But Alastair's work is not farming or herding, but rather the work of learning warfare. They walk to a small clearing near the settlement, a space used for weapons training, where several other young men are already assembling. These are Alastair's companions in training, boys and young men ranging from 14 to their early 20s, all learning the skills that may keep them alive in the violent world of Highland clan conflict. The training master is an old warrior named Seamus MacGregor, a man in his 60s who can no longer fight in the clan's battles due to age and injuries, but who possesses a lifetime of combat experience and who is responsible for training the next generation of warriors. Seamus is missing 2 fingers on his left hand, lost in a sword fight 30 years ago, and walks with a pronounced limp from a spear wound to his thigh. But his remaining abilities are more than sufficient for teaching, and his hard-earned knowledge is invaluable. "Good morning, you lazy whelps." Seamus greets the assembled trainees with the rough affection of a man who has trained hundreds of boys over decades. Today we continue work on the claymore, and specifically on the techniques for fighting against targe and broadsword, the style the MacDonalds favour. He gestures to a rack of practice weapons, wooden swords approximately the size and weight of real claymores, designed to allow full-force practice without the lethal danger of actual steel blades. The practice claymores are made from oak, approximately 5 feet long including the hilt, weighing perhaps 6 pounds, lighter than the real weapons, but heavy enough to build strength and to simulate realistic handling. Alastair selects a practice claymore, feeling its familiar weight, gripping the long hilt designed for two-handed use. He has trained with this weapon for 7 years, has swung it thousands of times, has developed considerable strength and skill. But Seamus constantly reminds the trainees that competence in practice is merely the beginning. Real mastery comes only through actual combat, through the experience of facing an opponent who is genuinely trying to kill you. Before the weapons training begins, Seamus leads the group through physical conditioning exercises, running in place to warm muscles, stretching to prevent injury, strength exercises using body weight and stones. Highland warfare requires tremendous physical fitness. Battles can last for hours. Fighting in rough terrain requires agility and endurance. Wielding a claymore for extended periods demands strength and stamina. After approximately 30 minutes of conditioning, the group is sweating, despite the cold morning air, muscles warm and prepared for the weapons work ahead. Seamus demonstrates the morning's techniques, specific attacks and defenses for fighting against an opponent using a single-handed sword and shield. The most common fighting style among Highland clans, and one that the MacGregors will certainly face when the MacDonalds attack. The claymore gives you reach and power, Seamus explains, demonstrating with his own practice weapon. A man with targe and broadsword must close to within 4 feet to strike you effectively. You can strike him from 6 feet. Use that advantage, keep your distance, force him to advance into your range, strike before he can close. He demonstrates a downward diagonal strike, a powerful two-handed blow that comes from high guard down toward an imaginary opponent's shoulder. The strike is delivered with the full body, legs driving, hips rotating, shoulders and arms extending, generating tremendous force at the point of impact. But the targe is effective defense, Seamus continues, having one of the senior trainees take up the practice targe and broadsword to demonstrate. If your opponent is skilled, he will catch your strike on his shield and will close while you're recovering. You must be ready to step back, to change angle, to strike again before he reaches you. The demonstration shows the tactical problem clearly. The Claymore warrior delivers a powerful strike that the Taj warrior blocks with his shield. Then the Taj warrior rushes forward during the brief moment when the Claymore warrior is recovering from the strike. The Claymore warrior must either strike again immediately or must retreat to maintain distance. Alistair and the other trainees practice these techniques, working in pairs, one wielding the practice claymore while the other uses practice Taj and broadsword. They strike and defend, attack and counterattack, building the reflexes and the tactical sense that combat requires. Alistair faces a companion named Dougal, a boy his own age who is slightly larger and stronger. Dougal uses the Taj and broadsword, advancing aggressively, attempting to close inside Alistair's reach, where the claymore's length becomes a disadvantage. Alistair strikes downward, aiming for Dougal's head, but Dougal catches the blow on his Taj, the practice weapon striking with a solid thunk. Dougal immediately rushes forward, his practice broadsword thrusting toward Alistair's chest. Alistair barely manages to step back and to bring his claymore around for a horizontal strike that forces Dougal to stop his advance and block with the Taj. The exchange demonstrates the challenge of claymore fighting. The weapon is powerful, but requires space and time to use effectively, and against an aggressive opponent with shield and shorter weapon, maintaining that space is difficult. The training continues for hours, the young warriors rotating through different partners, practicing different techniques, building their skills under Seamus's critical eye. He circulates constantly, observing, correcting, occasionally striking a trainee with a light stick to indicate poor form or tactical errors. Alistair, you're overcommitting on your strikes, Seamus calls out, demonstrating by tapping Alistair's ribs with his stick. If you miss, or if your opponent blocks, you're off balance and vulnerable. Strike with power, but maintain balance. You must be ready to recover instantly. By mid-morning, approximately 10 a.m., the trainees are exhausted from hours of intensive weapons work. But the training is not complete. One final exercise remains. The exercise that Seamus considers most important, and that most directly prepares warriors for the reality of clan combat. After a brief rest and water break, the training continues with instruction in the tactic that defines Highland warfare. The famous Highland charge, a coordinated mass assault that combines psychological intimidation with violent shock action to overwhelm opponents through speed, ferocity, and sheer courage. Let us follow Alistair through training in this tactic, observing both the specific techniques and the cultural values that make the Highland charge effective. Seamus assembles the trainees, approximately 20 young men, in a rough line, facing an imaginary enemy position, marked by stakes driven into the ground, perhaps 100 yards away. The Highland charge is not mindless rushing, Seamus explains, contradicting the popular image of wild, undisciplined Highlanders running at enemies without tactics or organization. It is controlled aggression, coordinated action, psychological warfare, combined with physical violence. You begin at distance, approximately 100 yards from your enemy. You are arranged in a loose line, not shoulder to shoulder like lowland infantry, but with space to move, to dodge, to use your weapons individually. You are carrying your claymore, but initially it is on your back or at your belt. Your hands hold your Taj, and perhaps a pistol or a thrown weapon. The trainees arrange themselves as instructed, Alistair holding a practice Taj in his left hand, his right hand empty, where in actual combat it might hold a pistol or a throwing dirk. The charge begins at a walk, Seamus continues. You advance steadily, maintaining your line, conserving energy. Your pipers are playing. The sound of bagpipes both coordinates your movement and creates psychological pressure on your enemies. You are shouting war cries, your clan slogan, your battle cry, whatever creates noise and intimidation. The trainees begin walking forward, and Seamus encourages them to make noise. Shout, let me hear you. Ard Coil. That's the MacGregor slogan, High Wood. Shout it like you mean to terrify the MacDonalds. The young men shout as they walk, the noise echoing across the glen. Ard Coil, Ard Coil. The shouting serves practical purposes. It builds aggression in the attackers, it intimidates defenders, and it creates a sense of collective action that binds individual warriors into a cohesive force. At 50 yards, you increase to a jog, Seamus instructs. Still controlled, still maintaining formation, but accelerating. This is when you might fire your pistols if you have them. At 50 yards, a pistol shot might hit something, might cause casualties, might disrupt the enemy line. The trainees increase their pace, jogging forward, continuing their shouting. The physical exertion is increasing. Jogging while shouting, while maintaining weapons readiness requires significant fitness. At 25 yards, you throw your targes, Seamus shouts over the noise. The targe is a weapon as well as a shield. You hurl it at the enemy line like a discus, aiming for faces, for exposed areas, trying to create confusion and gaps in their formation. The trainees mime throwing their practice targes. They don't actually throw them to avoid damage and to keep the practice safe, and Seamus explains the tactical purpose. The thrown targes force enemies to duck or to raise their own shields, creating moments of vulnerability. And more importantly, the thrown targes are immediately followed by you. The final 25 yards you sprint at full speed, drawing your claymore as you run, screaming at the top of your lungs, closing the distance before enemies can recover from the targe impacts. This final sprint is where the charge becomes truly effective. You are running at full speed, you are screaming like madmen, you have just thrown your shields at your enemies' faces, and now you crash into their line with drawn claymores, striking with all the force of your sprint behind your blows. The psychological and physical shock is enormous. Even disciplined troops can break when faced with this assault. The trainees practice the full sequence several times, beginning at 100 yards, walking, then jogging, then sprinting, shouting throughout, miming the throwing of targes, drawing practice claymores, and striking at the imaginary enemy line with full commitment. The physical demands are brutal. The sprint at the end, done while shouting and while drawing a 6-pound sword, while wearing armor and equipment, leaves the trainees gasping for breath, hearts pounding, muscles burning. But Seamus is merciless. Again, in real battle, you may charge twice, 3 times if the first attacks don't break the enemy. Your fitness must be sufficient to sprint repeatedly. Again, by the 3rd repetition, several trainees are struggling, their sprints are slowing, their shouts are weaker, their weapon handling is becoming sloppy from exhaustion. But this is precisely the point of the training, to push physical capabilities to and beyond normal limits, to build the stamina and resilience that combat requires. After perhaps an hour of charge practice, Seamus allows the exhausted trainees to rest, and he provides additional instruction on the tactical considerations that govern when and how to employ the Highland charge. The charge is effective in specific conditions, he explains. You need terrain that allows rapid movement, flat or gently sloped ground, free of obstacles. You need numerical advantage, or at least parity. Charging a larger force that doesn't break means being surrounded and slaughtered. You need the element of surprise, or at least the ability to close distance before the enemy can employ missile weapons effectively. Against disciplined lowland infantry with muskets and pikes, the charge can fail. They can shoot you down as you approach, or they can present pike walls that you cannot easily penetrate. Against cavalry, the charge can fail. Horsemen can ride you down, or can evade and counterattack. The charge works best against infantry of similar quality to yourselves, other Highland clans, poorly disciplined lowland troops, enemies who can be intimidated into breaking formation. This tactical instruction reflects the reality that the Highland charge, while famously effective in the right circumstances, is not a universal solution and can result in disaster if employed incorrectly. Historical battles like Culloden in 1746 will demonstrate what happens when Highlanders charge against well-prepared, disciplined enemies with superior firepower. The results are catastrophic. But against other Highland clans, against enemies using similar tactics and weapons, the Highland charge is devastatingly effective. The combination of psychological intimidation, rapid closing of distance, and violent shock action at the moment of impact creates tactical advantages that can break enemy formations and turn battles into routs. After the charge training concludes, the morning's formal weapons instruction is complete. But Seamus has one final lesson for the day, a lesson not in physical technique, but in the psychology and ethics of Highland warfare. He gathers the trainees in a circle and addresses them with unusual seriousness. You train to be warriors, to defend your clan, to take revenge on enemies who wrong us. This is honorable and necessary. But you must understand what warfare truly is. It is not the glorious adventure that the bards sing about. It is killing and being killed. It is watching your friends die. It is doing violence that will haunt you. When you charge the MacDonalds, and you will charge them soon, you will be trying to kill men who are very like yourselves. They have families, they have reasons for fighting, They believe in their cause as much as you believe in yours. But you must kill them anyway, because they will kill you if you don't. Some of you will die in the coming battle. Some of you will be wounded in ways that never fully heal. Some of you will kill men and will remember their faces for the rest of your lives. This is the warrior's burden. We serve our clan, we do violence on their behalf, and we carry the weight of that violence forever. This somber conclusion to the morning's training provides a counterweight to the aggressive energy of the charge practice. Seamus, who has killed many men and has seen many friends killed, understands that warfare is necessary in Highland society, but that it is also tragic, that it destroys lives and communities, that the glory celebrated in songs is purchased with suffering that the songs rarely mention. The trainees listen in silence, the young men's bravado tempered by the old warrior's hard-earned wisdom. They are eager to prove themselves in combat, eager to earn the status that warriors enjoy, but they are also beginning to understand the true costs of the warrior's path. As the trainees disperse to return to their homes for the midday meal, Alastair reflects on Seamus's words. He knows that battle is coming, probably within days. He knows that he will be expected to charge the enemy, to kill or be killed, to prove his courage and his worth. He feels simultaneously eager for this test and terrified of it, confident in his training, but aware that training and combat are very different experiences. The afternoon will bring more training, individual practice with weapons, instruction in battlefield awareness and tactics, and the specific preparation for the anticipated MacDonald raid. The work of becoming a Highland warrior is never complete, and in a society where violent death can come at any moment, constant preparation is the price of survival. After the midday meal, a simple repast of bread, cheese, and ale consumed quickly at home, Alastair returns to the training ground for the afternoon session, which focuses on detailed instruction in the claymore itself, examining this iconic weapon's characteristics, its advantages and limitations, and the specific fighting techniques that make it effective in Highland warfare. Let us examine the claymore in detail through Alastair's afternoon training, understanding both the weapon itself and how Highland warriors actually used it in combat. The term claymore is somewhat confusing in historical context because it actually refers to two different weapons. The earlier claymore, called the claymore in Scottish Gaelic, meaning great sword, is a large two-handed sword used from approximately the 15th to the 17th centuries. The later basket-hilted broadsword, also sometimes called a claymore, is a single-handed sword that became standard Highland weaponry in the 18th century. Our narrative focuses on the earlier two-handed claymore, the weapon that Alastair and his contemporaries in the 1590s would use. Seamus begins the afternoon session by displaying several actual claymores, real weapons, not practice versions, allowing the trainees to examine them closely and to understand their construction and characteristics. The claymore that Seamus shows first is a magnificent weapon, approximately 5 feet in overall length, with a blade of perhaps 40 inches and a hilt of about 18 inches. The blade is made from steel, double-edged, tapering gradually from the hilt to the point. The crossguard is distinctive, angled forward toward the blade, with the ends terminating in quatrefoils, 4-lobed decorative elements that are characteristic of Highland claymores. The grip is wrapped in leather, designed to be gripped with both hands, providing the leverage necessary to wield the heavy blade effectively. The pommel is simple but effective, a large rounded or wheel-shaped piece of metal that counterbalances the blade, and that can be used as a weapon itself if an enemy closes too near for the sword to be used effectively. The total weight of this claymore is approximately 6.5 pounds, heavy by modern standards, but not impossibly so, and well balanced so that the weight is distributed appropriately between blade and hilt. The claymore is a cut-in weapon primarily, Seamus explains, demonstrating with careful swings that keep the blade safely away from the watching trainees. The blade's geometry, relatively wide with a gradual taper, is optimized for cutting strikes rather than for thrusting. You can thrust with it, and sometimes you will, but the primary technique is cutting, powerful swings that use the blade's edge to cleave through flesh and bone. He demonstrates the basic cuts, downward diagonal strikes from high guard, horizontal strikes at head or body level, rising strikes that come from low position upward. Each strike is delivered with full body engagement. The power comes not just from the arms, but from legs, hips, and torso working together to generate force. The two-handed grip gives you power that single-handed weapons cannot match, Seamus continues. A one-handed sword cut might not penetrate heavy clothing or leather armor. A claymore cut delivered with proper technique will cut through wool, through leather, through flesh, will break bones, will disable or kill with a single strike. Historical accounts and forensic evidence from battlefield excavations confirm this assessment. Claymore wounds documented in historical sources include severed limbs, cleaved skulls, and massive cutting injuries that were immediately fatal. The weapon's effectiveness in creating devastating wounds is one reason why it remained in use for centuries despite its size and weight. But the claymore has limitations, Seamus warns, demonstrating by moving the weapon slowly through various positions. It is large and requires space to use effectively. In confined spaces, inside buildings, in thick forests, in tight pressed battle where you're surrounded by friend and foe, the claymore is too unwieldy. It requires two hands, so you cannot use a shield while wielding it, which leaves you vulnerable to missile weapons and to quick opponents. This is why we carry other weapons as backup. The dirk, he gestures to the long dagger at his belt, serves for fighting in close quarters when the claymore cannot be used. Some warriors carry a single-handed broadsword as well, allowing them to fight with sword and targe when that style is more appropriate. The trainees examine the claymores closely, hefting them carefully, feeling the weight and balance. Alistair lifts one, noting how different it feels from the practice weapons he has been using. The real steel is better balanced, more responsive, and carries a psychological weight that practice weapons lack. This is a real weapon, designed for killing, and holding it creates a sobering awareness of its purpose. Seamus then provides detailed instruction in the specific techniques for using the claymore effectively. Highland swordsmanship is not a formal martial art with codified techniques and written manuals, unlike contemporary European fencing traditions. Instead, it is a practical combat system transmitted through demonstration and practice, emphasizing effective techniques that work in actual combat over aesthetic forms. The basic guard positions are simple and functional. High guard, the sword held above the head with blade angled back, ready to deliver downward cuts. Middle guard, the sword held at waist level, blade forward, ready to strike in multiple directions. Low guard, the sword held with blade angled down, ready for rising strikes or for transitioning to other positions. From these basic positions, the warrior can deliver a range of strikes. Downward diagonal cuts, powerful strikes coming from high guard, aimed at the opponent's head, shoulder, or collarbone. These are among the most powerful strikes, using gravity to assist the cut, capable of cleaving through armor and bone. Horizontal cuts, strikes at head or body level swinging from the side, effective against opponents attempting to close distance, or against multiple opponents arrayed to the sides. Rising cuts, strikes that come from low position upward, targeting the opponent's hands, arms, or underside of the chin, useful for surprising opponents and for following up after other strikes. Thrusts, though the claymore is primarily a cutting weapon, thrusts to the chest or throat can be devastatingly effective, and the long blade allows thrusting from distance that keeps the warrior relatively safe from counterattack. The trainees practice these techniques with their practice claymores, striking at wooden posts wrapped in rope and padding, building muscle memory and striking power. Seamus circulates among them, correcting form, demonstrating proper technique, ensuring that each trainee develops effective habits. Alistair, your downward cut is too vertical, Seamus observes, demonstrating with his own weapon. You want a diagonal cut, from high right to low left, or high left to low right. The diagonal angle gives you more cutting surface contact with the target, creates more devastating wounds. Strike diagonal, not straight down. Alistair adjusts his technique, striking the practice post with corrected angle. The difference is immediately apparent. The diagonal cut bites into the rope-wrapped post more deeply than his previous vertical strikes did. The training continues for hours, the repetitive striking building tremendous strength in the trainees' arms, shoulders, and backs. Wielding a 6-pound sword hundreds of times in practice, thousands of times over weeks and months, creates the physical conditioning necessary to use the weapon effectively in battle, where fighting may continue for extended periods. As the afternoon progresses toward evening, Seamus introduces more advanced techniques, combinations of strikes, footwork for maintaining optimal distance, defensive techniques for parrying or evading opponents' attacks, methods for fighting multiple opponents simultaneously. The multiple opponent scenario is particularly important for Highland warfare. Clan battles are not formalized duels, but are chaotic melees where warriors may find themselves surrounded by enemies, where situational awareness and the ability to defend from multiple directions are essential for survival. Seamus demonstrates. When fighting multiple opponents, you must keep moving, must prevent them from surrounding you completely. Use your reach. The claymore can threaten opponents at 6 feet, forcing them to stay at distance. Strike at one opponent, then immediately transition to threaten another, keeping all of them cautious, preventing any of them from rushing you while you're engaged with another. The trainees practice this scenario, one warrior with a claymore facing 3 opponents with practice targe and broadsword. The scenario is extremely challenging. The single claymore warrior must constantly reposition, must strike decisively enough to force opponents back, but must never commit so fully to one opponent that the others can rush in unopposed. Alistair attempts the scenario and is quickly overwhelmed. While he engages one opponent with a powerful downward cut, the other 2 rush in from the sides, their practice weapons striking his ribs and back before he can recover his guard. He is dead within perhaps 15 seconds. Again, Seamus orders, you must be quicker, must strike and recover, must keep your guard up even while striking. Again. Alistair repeats the scenario multiple times, gradually improving, learning to use the claymore's reach to keep opponents at bay, learning to strike without overcommitting, learning the exhausting constant motion required to survive against multiple foes. By the time the afternoon training concludes and the sun is setting over the western mountains, Alistair is utterly exhausted. His arms are leaden from swinging the practice claymore hundreds of times. His legs are shaking from the constant footwork and movement. His entire body is sore from the day's intensive training. But he is also improved. His technique is sharper, his strikes are more powerful and more accurate. His understanding of the claymore's strengths and limitations is deeper. He is becoming the warrior that his clan needs, preparing for the battle that is surely coming. 3 days after the intensive training session, the anticipated MacDonald raid occurs. Intelligence from clan scouts reports that a MacDonald force of approximately 80 men has entered MacGregor territory, has stolen a herd of cattle from the eastern glen, and is currently driving the cattle back toward MacDonald land. Clan Chief Gregor immediately assembles the fighting men, approximately 100 warriors, ranging from experienced veterans to young men like Alistair, who have trained but have never fought in actual combat. The plan is to pursue the MacDonald raiders, to intercept them before they reach MacDonald territory, and to recover the stolen cattle, while also inflicting casualties on the MacDonald force to discourage future raids. Let us follow Alistair through his first combat experience, observing how training translates into actual battle and how the brutal reality of clan warfare differs from practice. The MacGregor force assembles rapidly. Within 2 hours of the alarm being raised, 100 men are armed and ready to march. Most carry claymores and targes, though some carry single-handed broadswords and larger shields, and a few have firearms, expensive matchlock muskets that are prized possessions and that give their bearers significant prestige. Alistair is equipped with his full war gear. He wears his padded leather jerkin over his lane, providing some protection against cuts. He carries his targe on his left arm, a round wooden shield approximately 18 inches in diameter, covered with leather, with a central brass boss behind which his hand grips the handle. His claymore is slung across his back on a leather baldric, ready to be drawn when combat begins. His dirk is at his belt as backup weapon. He carries no firearm. These are reserved for senior warriors and for those wealthy enough to afford them. His father Donald marches beside him, carrying similar equipment, his face set in the grim expression of a man heading toward violence. Donald has fought in perhaps 20 clan battles over his life, has killed multiple enemies, has been wounded several times. He knows exactly what Alistair is about to experience, and he provides what guidance he can during the march. "Stay close to me during the fight," Donald instructs quietly. "Don't try to be a hero. Don't rush ahead seeking glory. Fight as part of our line. Support your clansmen. Watch for opportunities, but don't take stupid risks. Your first battle is about survival, not about proving yourself." The MacGregor force marches rapidly through the rough Highland terrain, following the tracks left by the MacDonald raiders and the stolen cattle. The pace is punishing, perhaps 4 miles per hour across heather-covered slopes, through streams, over rocky ground. The warriors maintain this pace for hours, their fitness and their intimate knowledge of the terrain, allowing them to move quickly despite the difficult conditions. By late afternoon, after perhaps 3 hours of pursuit, the scouts report that the MacDonald force is visible ahead, approximately 1 mile distant, moving slowly due to the cattle they're driving. The MacGregors increase their pace, closing the distance, preparing to engage before the MacDonalds can reach the disputed boundary between clan territories. As the range closes to perhaps half a mile, both sides become aware of each other. The MacDonald force halts, forms a rough battle line, prepares to defend their captured cattle. The MacGregor force also deploys from march column into battle line, approximately 100 men in a loose formation perhaps 200 yards wide. Alastair's heart is pounding, not from exertion, but from fear and adrenaline. This is real combat, not practice. The MacDonald warriors visible across the glen are enemies who will try to kill him, who must be killed or driven off if the MacGregors are to recover their cattle and maintain their honour. Clan Chief Breger rides along the MacGregor line on his garran, the small sturdy horse typical of the Highlands, offering final instructions and encouragement. They outnumber us slightly, but we have right on our side. They are cattle thieves. We are defenders of our property. We will charge them in the Highland fashion. We will break their line. We will drive them from our lands. For Clan Gregor, Ard Coil. The MacGregor warriors respond with the clan slogan, Ard Coil, Ard Coil. The shouting builds courage, suppresses fear, creates collective identity that binds individual warriors into a unified force. The MacGregor line begins to advance, initially at a walk, closing the distance from 200 yards to 150 yards. The MacDonald line holds position, preparing for the battle ahead. Their own warriors shouting their battle cry, Freoch Eilean, Heathery Island, the MacDonald slogan. At 100 yards, both sides have warriors with firearms who begin shooting. The range is too great for accuracy, but the psychological effect is significant. Musket balls whizzing through the air, the smoke and noise of gunfire, the possibility that any moment a ball might strike you. Several men on both sides are hit in this initial exchange, some wounded, some killed, but most shots miss in the smoke and confusion. At 50 yards, the MacGregor advance increases to a jog, the warriors continuing their shouting, the psychological pressure building on both sides. Alastair jogs forward with the line, his mouth dry with fear, his grip tight on his targe, his claymore still on his back, but ready to be drawn. At 25 yards, following the training he has practiced dozens of times, Alastair hurls his targe at the MacDonald line. Around him, 100 targes spin through the air toward the enemy, a barrage of wooden shields aimed at faces and exposed areas. Most targes miss their targets, or are blocked by raised shields, but some strike home. Alastair sees one MacDonald warrior struck in the face by a spinning targe, the man falling backward, blood streaming from his nose. The thrown targes create a moment of disruption in the MacDonald line, gaps and confusion that the MacGregors immediately exploit. The final 25 yards, Alastair sprints at full speed, drawing his claymore from his back as he runs, screaming at the top of his lungs, a wordless battle cry that expresses rage and fear and aggression all mixed together. Around him, 100 MacGregor warriors are doing the same, a human wave of armed men charging at full sprint toward the enemy line. The MacDonald line wavers. Some men stand firm, some begin backing away, some break and run before the MacGregors even reach them. But most hold position, raising shields and weapons, preparing to receive the charge. Alastair crashes into the MacDonald line with tremendous force, his claymore swinging in a powerful downward diagonal cut aimed at the nearest enemy warrior. The MacDonald, a man approximately 40 years old, wearing a steel helmet and carrying targe and broadsword, blocks Alastair's strike with his targe, the claymore's blade striking the wooden shield with tremendous impact. The MacDonald counterattacks immediately, his broadsword thrusting toward Alastair's chest. Alastair barely manages to dodge to the side, the blade passing within inches of his ribs. He strikes again with his claymore, a horizontal cut at head level, and again the MacDonald blocks with his targe. The fighting is nothing like practice. The stakes are real. A single mistake means death or serious injury. The opponent is skilled and experienced, fighting with the desperation of a man defending his life and his honor. The chaos around them is overwhelming. Dozens of individual combats occurring simultaneously, men shouting and screaming, the clash of weapons on shields, the smell of sweat and blood and fear. Alistair and the MacDonald warrior exchange blows for perhaps 30 seconds, an eternity in combat, neither able to create a decisive opening. Then the MacDonald makes a small error. He overextends slightly on a thrust, his shield position dropping. Alistair sees the opening and strikes with a rising cut that catches the MacDonald under the chin, the claymore's edge cutting into the unprotected throat. The MacDonald falls, blood spraying from the terrible wound, his hands going to his throat in a futile attempt to stop the bleeding. He will be dead within minutes, choking on his own blood, his life ending on this muddy hillside, far from home. Alistair has no time to process what he has done. He has just killed a man, has ended a life, has created a wound that will haunt him. But another MacDonald warrior is already attacking him, and survival requires immediate focus on the new threat. The battle continues for perhaps 20 more minutes of intense combat, the two lines locked together, individual warriors fighting desperately, some falling wounded or dead, others continuing to fight despite injuries. The MacGregor charge has disrupted the MacDonald formation. But the MacDonalds have not broken completely, have formed defensive groups, are fighting skillfully. Finally, after casualties on both sides have mounted to perhaps 20 dead and 30 wounded total, the MacDonald force begins to withdraw in relatively good order, abandoning the stolen cattle, but extracting their wounded and maintaining enough organization to prevent the MacGregors from pursuing too aggressively. Chief Gregor allows them to withdraw. The cattle have been recovered, the MacGregors have won the tactical engagement, and pursuing a withdrawing enemy through unfamiliar territory risks ambush and additional casualties. As the fighting dies down and the battlefield falls silent except for the moans of wounded men, Alistair stands among the dead and wounded, his claymore bloody, his hands shaking with adrenaline aftermath, his mind struggling to process the violence he has experienced and inflicted. The immediate aftermath of the battle is grim work. Caring for the wounded, gathering the dead, securing the recovered cattle, and preparing for the possibility that the MacDonald force might regroup and counterattack. Let us follow Alistair through the post-battle period, observing the human cost of clan warfare and the psychological impact on warriors that survive their first combat. The MacGregor casualties are relatively light by Highland standards. 8 men dead, 15 wounded seriously enough to require significant medical care, and numerous others with minor wounds that will heal without intervention. The MacDonald casualties, counting bodies left on the field and wounded men seen being carried away during their withdrawal, appear to be slightly higher, perhaps 12 dead and 20 wounded. These numbers, perhaps 30 men killed or seriously wounded total from the combined forces of approximately 180 men, represent a casualty rate of approximately 17%, quite high for a brief engagement, but not unusual for Highland clan battles where combat is at close range with deadly weapons. Alistair helps carry wounded MacGregor warriors to a nearby cottage that is being used as a field hospital. The wounded are in various states of distress. Some are conscious and talking, some are unconscious from blood loss or shock, some are screaming in pain from terrible wounds. One of the wounded is Dougal, Alistair's training partner, who has received a deep sword cut to his right arm that has severed muscle and possibly tendons. Dougal is conscious but pale from blood loss, his arm wrapped in makeshift bandages that are already soaked through with blood. "Did we win?" Dougal asks weakly as Alistair helps him into the cottage. "Did we recover the cattle?" "Aye, we won," Alistair confirms, trying to sound more confident than he feels. "The MacDonald scum are running back to Glencoe, and we have our cattle back." The medical care available for the wounded is limited and primitive by modern standards. The clan has no trained physicians. The nearest doctor is in the lowlands, days of travel away, and prohibitively expensive. Instead, the wounded are tended by women of the clan who have experience treating injuries, using traditional remedies and practical techniques passed down through generations. The treatment for Dougal's arm wound consists of cleaning the wound with whiskey. The alcohol has antiseptic properties, though the mechanism is not understood. Attempting to stitch the severed tissues back together using needle and thread, and bandaging the arm tightly to control bleeding. Whether Dougal will regain full use of his arm is uncertain. If infection sets in, he may lose the arm or may die. Even if infection is avoided, the severed muscle and tendons may not heal properly, leaving him permanently disabled. Similar treatments are provided for the other wounded, cleaning wounds with alcohol, stitching cuts, setting broken bones with splints, bandaging and hoping for the best. Some men will recover fully, some will be permanently disabled, some will develop infections and will die days or weeks later from complications. The dead are wrapped in their plaids and are laid out in a row. A Presbyterian minister who serves the MacGregor clan offers prayers for their souls, and arrangements are made for burial. The bodies will be carried back to the main settlement for proper burial in the clan cemetery, with funerals conducted according to Highland tradition. As Alastair looks at the row of dead MacGregor warriors, men he knew, men he trained with, men who were alive this morning and who are now corpses wrapped in blood-stained wool, the reality of warfare crashes over him with overwhelming force. He killed a man today. He saw friends killed and wounded. He experienced the terror and chaos of close combat where death can come in an instant from any direction. He finds a quiet spot away from the others and sits down, his claymore lying beside him, still stained with the blood of the MacDonald warrior he killed. His hands are shaking. His stomach is churning. His mind is racing through the images from the battle. The MacDonald's face as Alastair's sword cut his throat, the spray of blood, the man's desperate attempt to stop the bleeding, the life draining from his eyes. His father Donald finds him and sits down beside him, understanding without words what Alastair is experiencing. "Your first killing is hard," Donald says, quietly, staring out at the darkening mountains. "I still remember the first man I killed, a Campbell warrior, during a raid when I was 17. I can still see his face, 32 years later. It never completely goes away." "Does it get easier?" Alastair asks, his voice barely above a whisper. Donald considers before answering. "It gets different. You learn to live with it, to accept that this is what warriors do, that in our world, killing is sometimes necessary. But it never becomes easy, not if you remain fully human. The men who find killing easy are dangerous in ways beyond battle." They sit in silence for a while, father and son, veteran and novice, sharing the burden that warriors carry. "You fought well today," Donald finally says. "You killed an enemy. You survived. You helped your clan recover what was stolen. You can hold your head high, but you can also grieve for the necessity of it, for the man you killed, for the friends we lost. Being a good warrior doesn't mean being without feeling." This conversation represents the psychological dimension of Highland warfare that is often overlooked in romantic portrayals. The men who fought in clan battles were not psychopaths who enjoyed killing. They were farmers and herders, fathers and sons, who fought because their culture demanded it, and who carried the psychological burden of violence for the rest of their lives. As darkness falls, and the MacGregor force prepares for a night camp before returning home in the morning, Alastair reflects on how he has changed in a single day. This morning he was a trainee, a boy pretending to be a warrior. Tonight he is a warrior in truth. He has killed an enemy, has survived combat, has proven himself in the test that matters most in Highland culture. But he is also traumatized, shocked by the violence he experienced and inflicted, aware that the glorious image of warfare he held is a romantic fiction, and that the reality is blood and fear and death. The cattle are recovered. The MacGregors have won this engagement, but the blood feud with the MacDonalds continues. This battle will likely lead to MacDonald retaliation, which will lead to MacGregor counter-retaliation, in a cycle that could continue for years or even generations, unless the clan chiefs negotiate peace, or unless one clan is so weakened that it can no longer sustain the feud. This is the reality of Highland clan warfare, a system of endemic conflict, where battles like today's raid occur regularly, where every man must be ready to fight, where blood feuds can destroy families and communities, and where the romantic image of Highland warriors masks a brutal reality of violence, suffering, and trauma that affected everyone involved. As we conclude our exploration of how Scottish Highlanders used claymores in clan wars, let us examine what historical evidence tells us about these practices, what we can know with confidence and what remains debated, and what this reveals about Highland society and about the historical development of Scotland. The historical evidence for Highland clan warfare comes from several types of sources: contemporary accounts from Highland chiefs and their literate retainers, reports from Scottish lowland observers and English officials attempting to govern the Highlands, legal records documenting clan conflicts and their consequences, archaeological evidence, including battlefield sites and recovered weapons, and later ethnographic accounts collected from Highland informants who remembered the clan system before its destruction. These sources paint a consistent picture of a society organized around kinship groups, clans, where loyalty to clan and chief trumped loyalty to the Scottish crown, where disputes were often settled through violence, and where a distinctive martial culture developed that emphasized individual courage, skill with traditional weapons, and collective action in battle. The claymore itself, the two-handed Highland sword we have examined, is well documented in historical sources and in surviving examples. Museums hold hundreds of Highland claymores from the 15th to 17th centuries, allowing detailed study of their construction, dimensions, and characteristics. These surviving weapons confirm the descriptions in our narrative: blades of approximately 40 inches, overall length of 5 feet, distinctive forward-angled crossguards with quatrefoil terminals, weighing approximately 6 to 7 pounds. The weapons show signs of actual combat use: nicks and damage to blades, wear on grips, modifications and repairs indicating years of active service. The fighting techniques described in our narrative are based on interpretation of general principles of two-handed sword fighting, on descriptions in period sources, and on modern experimental archaeology, where practitioners attempt to reconstruct historical combat techniques. We do not have detailed written fighting manuals for Highland claymore use like we have for European fencing traditions, so some aspects of our narrative represent informed reconstruction rather than documented fact. Multiple historical accounts describe Highland forces employing this tactic in battles from the 16th through 18th centuries. The basic sequence, advance at walk, accelerate to jog, final sprint with drawn weapons, is consistently described across multiple sources. The tactic's effectiveness in specific circumstances is also well documented. Highland forces using the charge defeated Lowland and English forces in numerous engagements, most famously at battles like Killiecrankie, 1689, and Prestonpans, 1745, where disciplined government forces broke under Highland assault. But the tactic's limitations are equally well documented. At Culloden, 1746, the last major battle of the Highland clan system, Highland forces charging across open ground against well-prepared government troops with artillery and muskets suffered catastrophic casualties and were decisively defeated. The romanticized image of unstoppable Highland warriors was shattered by the brutal reality of disciplined firepower and superior tactics. The clan warfare system we have described, the cattle raiding, the blood feuds, the endemic low-intensity conflict, is extensively documented in historical sources. Scottish legal records from the 16th and 17th centuries are filled with cases involving clan disputes, stolen cattle, violent retaliations, and attempts by royal authority to impose law and order on the Highlands. The scale of violence is difficult to quantify precisely, but modern historians estimate that hundreds of small-scale raids and conflicts occurred annually across the Highlands during the peak period of clan warfare. Some blood feuds lasted for generations, killing dozens or even hundreds of people over decades of reciprocal violence. The psychological and social costs of this system were substantial. Communities existed in constant state of readiness for conflict. Resources were diverted to military preparedness that could have been used productively, and the trauma of violence affected entire generations. But the system also served functions in Highland society. The clan system provided security and identity in a region where central government authority was weak. The emphasis on martial prowess and courage created a warrior culture that produced excellent soldiers when Highland regiments were later incorporated into the British Army. The elaborate social networks and obligations that bound clan members together created social cohesion that helped communities survive in harsh environments. The destruction of the clan system following the Jacobite rebellions, particularly after Culloden in 1746, was catastrophic for Highland society. The British government systematically dismantled the military power of the clans through legislation banning traditional weapons and Highland dress, through forced cultural assimilation, through the breakup of clan territories during the Highland clearances, and through deliberate promotion of emigration that depopulated the region. By the early 19th century, the Highland clan system as a functional social and military organization had ceased to exist. What remained was increasingly romanticized cultural memory, tartans and bagpipes and Highland games, a sanitized version of Highland culture that emphasized romantic elements while obscuring the brutal realities of clan warfare and the violence of the system's destruction. Modern understanding of Highland warrior culture must navigate between two distortions: the romantic myth of noble Highland warriors fighting for freedom and tradition, and the opposite characterization of Highlanders as violent barbarians whose suppression was necessary for progress and civilization. The reality is more complex. Highland warriors were neither noble savages nor simple barbarians, but were people operating within a specific social system that valued martial prowess, that organized society around kinship and personal loyalty, and that perpetuated cycles of violence that served some functions while creating substantial human costs. For modern readers, several lessons emerge from studying Highland clan warfare. First, warrior cultures develop in response to specific social and environmental conditions. The Highland clan system emerged because central government authority was weak, because the terrain favored small-scale raiding, because kinship-based organization was effective for survival and defense. Understanding these conditions is essential for understanding the culture that developed. Weapons and tactics reflect cultural values and practical constraints. The claymore and the Highland charge were not arbitrary choices, but were adaptations to the specific requirements of Highland warfare. Fighting on rough terrain, emphasizing individual courage and collective action, operating with minimal logistical support. Third, romantic images of warrior cultures often obscure brutal realities. The popular image of Highland warriors is one of heroic resistance against oppression, but the historical reality included violence against fellow Highlanders, blood feuds that destroyed communities, and a system that trapped people in cycles of violence and retaliation. Fourth, the destruction of traditional warrior cultures, while sometimes necessary for broader social development, involves real costs and real suffering for the people affected. The suppression of Highland clan society after Culloden was deliberately harsh, involved cultural genocide as well as political subjugation, and created trauma that affected Highland communities for generations. As we conclude our exploration of how Scottish Highlanders used claymores in clan wars, we can appreciate both the martial skills these warriors developed and the tragic aspects of the system they served. Warriors like our fictional Alastair MacGregor represent real young men who trained intensively in weapons use, who fought bravely in defense of their clans, who killed and witnessed killing, who carried psychological burdens that songs and romantic stories rarely acknowledge. The claymore, the great two-handed sword that symbolizes Highland martial culture, was an effective weapon in skilled hands, capable of devastating wounds, feared by enemies. But it was also a tool of a violent system, used in conflicts that achieved little beyond perpetuating cycles of revenge, that cost lives and created suffering that extended far beyond individual battles. Understanding Highland warrior culture requires holding these contradictions in mind: the genuine courage and skill of Highland warriors alongside the often pointless violence of clan feuds, the effective tactics and weapons alongside the ultimate futility of resisting historical forces that would destroy the clan system, the romantic appeal of Highland culture alongside the brutal realities that the romance obscures. The legacy of Highland warriors survives in cultural memory, in museum collections of claymores and targes, in the continuing popularity of Highland games and traditions, and in the historical record that allows us to understand both the achievements and the tragedies of this distinctive warrior culture.